All right, everybody, thank you for joining us for today's webinar all about computer-based testing in New York. I know this is very top of mind for teams, especially as New York is moving more and more online for various grade levels. So this might be the first year that your school is giving the computer-based test. So let's dig into how you can align your assessments year-round to these new online assessments from New York. So first, I'm going to give you a basic introduction into who Edcite is, why we're even hosting this webinar, and then we're going to dig into the meat of today's presentation, which is all about those New York State assessments. So we'll talk a little bit about those standards from New York and different materials that the New York Department of Education has released to inform educators around the state on what they should expect. We'll talk about tech-enhanced items and then tools and accommodations that your students should be familiar with. And then finally, I'll share some resources and talk to you a little bit about our products here at Edcite called Edcite Schools and Data Hub. So let's start with who Edcite is. So Edcite is a company that fully believes that feedback drives growth and that the more we know, the better we can do. And so we tackle this idea of giving educators the most information possible with an aligned assessment and actionable data approach. And so there's a range of services and products that we have, but all of those services and products are really built to make sure that you have a good understanding of what your students need so that you can best respond to those needs. So our Edcite Schools platform is the premium assessment side, which is really the focus for today. But we also have Data Hub, which is a centralized data warehouse system. So you can bring all your data sets into one place for easy dashboarding. We offer PD, integrations, and content services. And so you can see why we talk about computer-based testing. This is our wheelhouse, and we want to share with all of you the information that we have learned in building assessments that align with those New York expectations. So let's talk about what New York has produced or put out there for educators around the state to check out. So they have released blueprints, sample items, standards support documents. If you are looking to start anywhere, I would recommend going to the New York State Education Department, look at their materials as your foundation. My favorite material that they have released is this educator guide. And so it's got, I mean, it's a 31-page document, okay? So you've got to commit to going through and finding what you want. But if you start to look at this section from page 13 on, it goes over the average time. So when you're thinking about how long should assessments be when I'm thinking about student testing endurance, when you're thinking about how many constructed response questions versus multiple choice questions, you've got all of that information in here by grade level. And then when we're thinking about the actual content standards, diving into, okay, well, I need to make sure that I've really got a strong foundation on operations and algebraic thinking for grade 3, because that's going to take up to 43% of the assessment. So having a good understanding of where students will be assessed, what it's going to look like, how long it will take is really helpful. And so I definitely recommend checking out those educator guides as well as just other resources that they share. Beyond blueprints and content and standards, they have also released sample items, and that's really where we spend most of our time. So Edcite as an organization really focuses on making sure that we understand what what is it going to look and feel like for kids at the end of the year? What technology skills do they need to understand in order to appropriately show all of that learning that they had throughout the year? So it's nice to actually go check out those question samplers that New York has produced and see, okay, my students need to know how to drag and drop in this way, or they need to know how to use a keypad or like a toolbar to add math symbols when writing an explanation. So building that familiarity with the technology skills, just setting them up to show what they know. If you're doing all this great learning all year and then you get to the end of it and you just don't know how to navigate the page, that is going to be so defeating for you as a student. So we want to set them up for success to really show what they know. So let's talk a little bit about the actual question types, because that's kind of where the rubber hits the road. It's like, what are the actual constructed responses? What do these tools look like? And so I'm going to take you through a sample assignment on Edcite that uses the different question types that you will find on the New York State Assessment. So let's pull that up here. I'm logged into a demo teacher account here. So your students, when they go in to take an assessment, wouldn't see copy assignment, print, or invite to share with colleagues. They would just see this section on the main page and they would click start assignment. So I'll just scroll so you don't see that top nav bar. So one of the question types that they talk about in the blueprints and just all over the materials is multiple choice questions. There will still be a significant number of multiple choice questions on your computer-based tests. And so making sure that students are familiar with that. In addition to single select, you'll also have multi-select. So in this example, students are asked to select 2 answer choices, whereas on this option, they were asked to select just 1. So you've got multi-select, single select, but both of those are considered multiple choice. Even just getting students familiar with the idea of I scroll on the left and I enter my answers on the right. This is an open response question. On Edcite, we call it the free response, but they're going to call it a constructed response. This would be another constructed response, but it gives a larger text box. And so this would be an essay question on Edcite. So if you're having students read a paired passages, and then you want them to draw a compare and contrast or talk about the differing points of view. You could have an essay question where they're reading, they're referencing the text, but they're entering their essays into the essay box. This one's going to be a math numeric answer, and this is also on that computer-based test where students are typing in, and I have been doing these far too long, but you can type in numbers and have it auto-graded just as it would on the end of year assessment. Now this one's nice because it's blending the keyboard and the open response, which you are going to see on some of those math and I believe some of those science questions, where students are able to, leverage the toolbar for a fraction, let's say, but then they're also able to type their words. So it's a combination of I have a toolbar and I've got my open response. And sometimes on those item samplers, you're going to see that they sometimes have a mix of both this keyboard open response where students are showing their work. So I'm showing my work here. maybe I'm doing like the steps of solving it, writing it all out, and then I'm entering my final answer in here. And so you can set this up one of two ways. You could either set part A to be worth 0 points if you didn't want to go in and do that grading yourself, and then refer back to it, or you could go ahead, make this worth some points, go in and score that, but the computer will auto score part B. And this is, just because I am mentioning scoring, I do want to reference back to this educator guide, because in here they do have guidance on, so we're going through these constructed responses, on scoring. And so there are different types of questions. So like your multiple choice 1 credit question versus your constructed response 2 credit questions. But down here, it actually goes into what are the rubrics for each of those types of questions. And I'll point out where you can add a rubric into Edcite if you want to go ahead and use these exact rubrics for those constructed responses. But let's keep looking at question types before we start talking rubrics. So this is another open response question, but this is, showing, I believe this is some science content. So you can see how you've got your images and then you've got your open response here, your constructed response. This one's going to be flexible where they can type in kinetic. I think it's actually from potential to kinetic, or, I taught ELA in social studies, but I'm sure the science teachers watching this have very clear understanding of let's see. In addition to energy being transferred, I'm pretty sure it's from potential to kinetic, but I'm going to let this go. Okay, so you've got that option to type in words just as they will at the end of the year. You've got your checkbox questions. So making sure students are familiar with this, I've got both rows and columns, and I need to be selecting the answers based on those overlaps. So giving them familiarity with that. This is another constructed response that we see on those New York State assessments. Again, this is looking more at science content, but it's got that toolbar attached to the open response, so students can type but still leverage those icons just as they would have a toolbar on the end of year computer-based test. This one looks like it's a drag and drop, and so in here they're looking at some information, and Edcite does support embedding simulations. I can point that out, and there's definitely resources not necessarily covered in this webinar where you can learn about how to embed your own simulations. But for our strict focus of question types and standards and blueprints, we'll just stick with this. But you've got drag and drops where students can drag and drop the answers into the boxes just as they would on those end of years. Graphing is also a technology skill, making sure students are comfortable dragging the bar graphs up. So I'm holding down my mouse, dragging it to where I want it to drop, manipulating that bar graph. And then I've got the same type of navigation. And as simple as it sounds, or as basic as it sounds, having a familiar interface can really build that comfort level with the technology. So if I am used to seeing these, orange versus white boxes, I can click in to navigate. Knowing how that looks and feels can definitely make you feel more comfortable. And the more comfortable and familiar you feel with the end of your test, we know students then do better. And so our goal is to make this as aligned and helpful for building those technology skills. So at the end of the year, when the state gets that data back, it's an accurate depiction of all of the great learning that students did year round. We want to remove technology as a barrier to showing student skills. Okay, so that is a very quick overview of what are the question types. We will follow up in an email and we'll put in the details of this YouTube recorded webinar after the fact, a link to a page that will have a chart that shows here's the question type, here's how you make it on Edcite, here's an example. But in the spirit of time, I don't want to go into how to create each of these. So we'll send those resources afterwards. So if you're ELA, you can focus in on ELA questions. If you're math, you can focus in on whatever level math questions are most relevant for you. And for science, you can focus in on the ones that matter the most to you. Okay, so in terms of tools and accommodations, Edcite offers a ton of tools and accommodations, again, because we want to provide students with an accessible assessment experience. So first and foremost, we want to make sure that if you are a student that needs text to speech, then we want to make sure you've got text to speech. So first and foremost, we want to make sure kids have what they need. But secondarily, we also want to make sure that they are familiar with those tools come the end of the year. So making sure students know how to access a reference sheet, making sure they know how to access a line reader. Some of these are specific to Edcite. So for example, the state test does not have an attach work option, but I will just show you on Edcite, we do have that because as a former teacher myself, I love to so I can hold up a picture of my work, take a picture, attach it, and then my teacher can access my written work in the grading page. So that is a really nice tool that is available on Edcite. This one is not on the end of year state test, but I did want to highlight it as super helpful for capturing student thinking. So when you start digging into those reports and you wonder, how in the world did they come up with that number? You might find when looking at the written paperwork that the student inverted the numbers. And so they had all of the process correct. It was just a transferring the number to paper mistake. And so those are good things for you to catch because that's going to change what your response is as an educator. So in the resources that we send out afterwards, it's going to include, again, information about each of these. This is kind of a large scale highlight of what is available and how you can use it. So moving to the portion of today where I share some resources. So this New York Common Assessments Initiative is a great free, whoops, let me change this to say New York. New York Common Assessments Initiative. So if you go to Google and look up Edcite New York Common Assessments, or we'll be sure to share out this URL. It's just edcite.com/new-york-common-assessments. So plug in dashes where there were spaces. And that's going to bring you to this page, which is going to give anyone access to our premium state assessment look and feel, even if you have the free teacher account for these released New York State tests. So you can see in here, even though today's session really focused on ELA, math, and science, as the state is moving towards more of those grade levels being mandatory online, we do also digitize the Regents assessments just so they are available for teams if you would like to give it in an online format just for efficiency and some of the great reports that come out of Edcite. So you can come in here, let's say I want to grab the grade 5 ELA assessment. it's all built in here. So I can get students familiar with the expander. I can get them familiar with some of my bookmarking tools, the general navigation, and those question types. So I'll pop over to a math example. But this is something, again, you can share with your team. They can sign up for free and, bring in their classes from Google Classroom or, maybe a Clever Library import. However is easiest for your teachers to roster. There's a lot of different pathways. And then for teams, we do, if you go with the school and district version, we can do rostering from a centralized spot. So you can roster with ClassLink, with Clever, with let's think, Schoology, Canvas. There's a lot of rostering options. And so once the kids are in there, then they can complete these released assessments. And one good thing is that Edcite has a ton of resources. So if I go into the collections, I'm going to see that there is a good amount already shared in here. So if I wanted to give some Achieve the Core resources, so we've got Achieve the Core ELA, Achieve the Core Math assessments. And what's really nice is that Edcite is the partner shared on Achieve the Core's website as the digital version of these math mini assessments. So you'll notice here that even though it's an Achieve the Core assessment, because this teacher account I'm in has that school and district premium version, it's going to put that shell of the New York look and feel all around the material. And so I can, again, build those tech skills, that familiarity, while doing whatever content I want, whether it's Achieve the Core, whether it's science journal for kids, whether it's a particular textbook that you have permission to deliver in a digital format. Any of that content can be then displayed in Edcite with that CBT style. So to close us out, before I take any final questions, just a quick overview. Like I said, everyone can get started right now, edcite.com for free. So Edcite is a free platform for teachers. It will always be free, and it's really important to us that teachers have access to a powerful tool at no cost. We do have 2 paid platform offerings. The first I want to talk about is Edcite Schools. And so that's going to go beyond just those released New York State tests that I mentioned. And it's going to put everything that you deliver on Edcite in that New York State look and feel. Plus, it's going to give you pathways to give common assessments and aggregate that data and look at it as a team. So really, the Edcite Schools platform is built for a school or district implementation, making sure that you can turn on accommodations to follow the students, making sure you've got enough reports to progress monitor, and then having that look and feel to make sure that your assessments that you give, formative or summative, are building those tech skills. And then Data Hub is less about the assessment side, but more about then what? I get all of this data from New York about how our students do on this test each year. I might also have a team that is doing NWEA testing. Maybe they're taking iReady. Maybe you want to look at your attendance and see correlations. We all know that chronic absenteeism is such a problem right now. So having data systems that help us really effectively and efficiently centralize our data systems and then respond to that data, that's really the point of implementing Data Hub, is bring that data together and make it really actionable for your various team members.